Hi guys, Rene here and welcome to the workshop. Today I want to talk a bit more about my new time trial bike. A lot of people have been asking questions about it and it sparked quite a lot of interest. So as you know, for this year I'm no longer with Factor Bikes, and for the time trial I have a free choice. Originally I was not planning to replace my Hanzo, but then I saw this in the flesh when I was building it up for a customer, and I looked at the geometry chart, and that's why I really liked it, because usually, well, not usually, always, I have quite a low saddle position, which means that on most time trial bikes it's problematic for me to get a proper fit, because a lot of them tend to have quite a big stack height in the small sizes. That was really obvious with the speed concept that I had. It was even worse with the Shiv TT that I had after that. So the size S was huge. The extra small was a bit better, but still I was basically on the base bar with the extensions, which is not ideal in terms of aerodynamics. Then I had the Hanzo, which is also, it was a lot lower, but because of the fork design and how the slider moves on it that holds the extensions, it means that on the Hanzo, if you have a low stack, it doesn't really work very nicely because you have quite a lot of material on this side where you don't want it. So it wasn't ideal, and this is, at least from the ones that I've seen, by far the lowest stack time trial bike that is on the market right now. It's super low. So even though I have quite a low position both on the back and on the front, I still can have at least 50 millimeters of risers here, which is very new for me, and it's a big plus. So just for that reason alone I wanted to try this bike. And then of course I think it looks pretty good as well. I think many of you agree based on the reactions, so that's why I went for it. And yeah, the rest of the setup basically I already had pretty much dialed, so just a few changes there. So now let me talk you through about the exact components that are being used. So the frame set, of course, that's pretty obvious. That's the Colnago TT1. It's only available in 3 sizes, S, M, L. However, with time trial bikes, and particularly when your stack is this low, that's not an issue at all, because everything is basically adjusted with the risers. You can have fore and aft and also stack built into that, so that's not really a big deal. It's very flexible. This bike has been designed according, of course, to the latest UCI regulations, or I would say maybe D regulations, because they're not as strict anymore. So you have a very deep section on the front, super deep section on the seat post, radically dropped well, seat stays, they kind of a weird shape. Just to, yeah, this is basically the bracket for the UCI, where they can connect as low as possible, and yeah, generally just a very nice design. One odd or unique thing about this bike is that it doesn't really come with any front end aero bar setup, and like nothing, no risers, no extensions, no pads. You buy this frame and there's nothing in it, just the base bar. Which on one hand, if you're a beginner, this bike might not be for you because you have nowhere to start off from. However, from me, already having a custom set of extensions, it gives me a blank sheet, because then basically I can just use what I already have and what is good for me, and just accommodate that using the risers, as I said before. And these are custom machines for me, based on my exact specifications. They're still, well, these first set are just mimicking my position from the Hanzo, but I also have a couple more variants with a bit more stack, bit more reach, and also the other way around to use for aero testing. So we'll have a good baseline setup there. But yeah, because of this, or thanks to this, didn't have to mess around with anything else. I could just go straight to what I need. Obviously, if you don't have someone or a company that can manufacture these for you, then it's a tricky situation. But if you need help with that, of course, you can contact me and through my web shop or through my email, and we can do this for you as well, as we already have all the necessary measurements and details that are needed to fit it. So that's the front end. Yeah, the Spico extensions are carried over from my Hanzo, as I said. So from the top, they're fixed by two M5 bolts, and two M6 bolts go in from the bottom. So it's there's a lot of space in between to make various dimension adjustments. If you talk about the components themselves, so on the front, I have the head V84 Pro front wheel, which I described previously. And I've been riding this for a few weeks now, and I have to say it's a big improvement in over the old one in terms of crosswind stability. Despite the increased depth, it just is better. You get basically no sudden jerking movements in any kind of wind situation. Yes, you of course feel the pressure build up. It's all very manageable and very predictable, so I need to get out of the air bars much less. However, some of that I also attribute to the bike itself. Because of the geometry, it seems to have a lot more weight on the front wheel, and that makes it incredibly stable as well. So I like that over my previous bike. The handling is much more stable, much better in the corners. However, it's I would say it's not so nimble on the other hand, but I think for a time trial bike this is preferable. The base bar itself also has quite a big amount of drop, as you can see. It also can't be flipped like on many other bikes, so it's a very, very aggressive position for time trialing. But I like that feature. It's not for everyone, but definitely suits me. Another thing about this bike that I do like is the simplicity. Basically, the whole base bar is held together by two bolts, one clamp going from the side, and that's pretty much it. Very few components. However, I had to modify the standard Shimano wiring because the junction that I wanted to use can't fit into the base bar, so I had to put it in the frame. But then the Y splitter cable that we normally use for that, the bottom section that goes into the junction just wasn't long enough, so I had to make it longer. I can stuff it inside the frame. So that was a slight combination, but was easily solved with a bit of soldering. So yeah, not that straightforward, but it never really is with a bike like this. Then we have the ST9180 shifters. These are carryovers from the previous bike. It's a nice design. However, I would prefer them to have two buttons, so we don't need to use synchro shift, but more on that later. Then another thing I've carried over from the previous bike is the Carbon TI rotors, front and rear, 140mm on both. So these rotors are a big improvement, I think, over Shimano, and recently I've tried quite a few aftermarket rotors because I got fed up with the Shimano ones, and these are by far the most expensive, but they also perform the best. I don't really care about the weight because that's on a bike like this, it's completely a moot point, but they do have excellent thermal stability, so no warping, no sound, nothing whatsoever. And they do have a lot more friction than the standard ones, so the brake power is much better together with modulation. So really, really excellent. And another benefit is that since it's a carbon carrier, it's really flat and low profile. It doesn't have the bulky aluminum carrier that you get on Shimano and some other rotors as well. So that's nice. The fork, as I said, has a very, very deep section. Of course, it's a through axis fork. For some weird reason, I don't really understand why, but the bolt head actually it's bolted from the drive side, which is weird. Normally it's on the other side, but it's an Italian bike, so I guess that's it. The base bar has this flimsy little cover to cover up the brake hoses and cables wiring, which is not ideal, not very stiff, and it just, on this left side it just pokes out a little bit, so it's not that great. Could be made from, well, carbon would be nice, because then it will be stiff enough to hold itself where it should actually be. On the base bar I also have these Silca Nastro Aero grip tapes, which you can also get through our web shop. A lot of people have been asking about these, so it's specifically designed for this purpose, and you don't need to mess around with bar tape. So really nice and grippy, and doesn't destroy your hands like skateboard grip tape. I've already touched on the different riser versions that I have prepared for this bike, and to make testing easier, I've also modified the cabling or wiring on this section of the bike as well. So as you can see, because of the restrictions, I have to use these sprint shifters on the bottom with the extensions here to be shifted with my little finger, but these generally have, I think, around a 15 to 20 centimeter wire on them that's built in. So that's not long enough, unfortunately, to cover the whole length of the extension, and it's very awkward to put a connector inside them. So this we also lengthened, and the connector, the JC200, actually is, well, the risers we have designed in a way that they sit exactly in there. So despite the fact that it's a fully integrated bike and it doesn't have any slider like a Cervelo or a Factor, you can still adjust the stack extremely easily, because all you need to do is to disconnect this little part here from the JC200, and you can remove the whole extension part. So I think that's pretty neat. Also, for the bottom, I have used black anodized titanium bolts, not for weight savings, but mainly for corrosion prevention. I wanted to do the same for the top bolts, but unfortunately they were not available in that size in titanium, so those are steel. My bike computer also sits neatly in here on this Aero integrated mount. It's the element bolt that I've been using for the past 3 years, so nothing special in there. You can see basically the size of my traditional setup, so the parts that I generally use. I'm sure that many of you will like to point out that this bike has an integrated bottle, and I shouldn't be using this round one because it's not Aero. Yes, I'm fully aware of that, but as you will imagine, the integrated bottle is not very practical for training, so I don't use that at the moment. This is my training setup. Speaking of bottles, again, like with many other modern time trial specific frames, you only get one bottle mount on the frame itself, which again for training is not very practical. So I'm using a rear hydration mount for the WOW V8 saddle, which is, well, a solution to prevent that from being an issue. But again, it's a training setup, so that will be removed for racing. However, I will also be doing some non-UCI events on this bike, so I'll probably test a rear bottle setup in a few ways to see if that can actually save me a bit of drag. Now, not very traditionally, as you can see, it's a time trial bike where I have a double chaining setup. The main reason for that is that, well, there are twofold actually. The chainring that I had for the time trial bike originally, because of the classified system, now has migrated to a 3T road bike. So this is essentially what I have left. Last year, Aerocoach have sent me this double setup from the Aten rings for testing, and they work really great. The shifting is much better than any aftermarket chaining setup that I've tried, and it's the 58-44 ratio, so that's also a nice fit. So until my new cranks are completely ready, I'll be on this setup again for training mostly. Regarding the new setup, this is actually one of the biggest changes that I had, and the biggest upgrades maybe. So I've been looking at the Watchop Kratos crank for quite a few years now, but since there's no power meter option, I couldn't really make it work on my bikes until recently. So I'm not really a big fan of power meter pedals because, well, the Astiomas work well, but they're bulky. The Garmin's are not really reliable or weren't at the time. Then Speedplay have released their version, but these unfortunately turned out to be quite bulky as well, even though they work perfectly as I've tested earlier this year. So I didn't really want to go that way, but recently Look have released their new power meter design, which is said to have good power numbers, and it also is the sleekest of any of those options. So it uses the aero profile of the regular Keo blades. So this enables me to basically use the Kratos crank while still having power measurement on there. This is obviously a 1x option with a 60-tooth chainring. Now last week I tried to install this. There'll be a separate video about the issues. My hunch actually is that there's some problem in the machining of the ring, because there are some sections which going rather smoothly, and there's this part that it just doesn't work at all. And it's fairly easy, as you can see, but this area around the the connecting pin is very tight. So yeah, something's definitely off, and it's not uniform either. And to be honest, the thing that I experienced over the past few years with cycling companies and small brands in particular, that, no offense to anyone, but they work shit. You can't survive doing products like this in the automotive or in the motorbike industry or any other industry. And same as with Princeton, we had the huge issue, no one helped us. So in the end, I think I would just resort to having this machined myself, and just to take a couple of tenths off the chainring and the teeth in thickness. But let's try to contact Watchop, what do they say about it first. But I'm not happy. But yeah, one thing was that was preventing me from using this already is that the chainring was not compatible with the 12-speed Shimano chain. So I had to get it machined down, which is happening right now. And the second thing is that the spindle, the standard variant at least, was too short. It did fit into the bike, but with that chain line it created, actually in the big gears, the chain contacted the outside of the crank arm, so it was not really usable. So I already have the spindle. As you can see, this has been custom made, plus 4 millimeters, 30 millimeter diameter in stainless steel, so extremely stiff, not really generally used in cranks in this combination, but we'll see how it goes. The big benefit of these cranks, apart from the obvious aero shaping, is of course it has very narrow Q factor, which should be around 15 millimeters narrower even with the longer spindles, so that could be exciting in terms of the drag numbers. So that's part of the drivetrain. The rest, I would say, is not really all that interesting because it's a normal Dura setup that I've been on, so I don't really want to talk too much about that. The rear head wheel is an updated version of the Vanquish disc that I've been using previously. It also has a slightly modified shape, so should be slightly faster, but for me the big benefit is that now it's shaped in a way that it clears the rear mech even with an oversized cage, and even in the little ring, or sorry, the easiest gear, the biggest cog. Previously, all of the wheels that I've used so far had interference on there, so this one is the first one that doesn't. And also they moved the valve cutout, so you no longer need to use a specific valve for the tubeless systems, which is also nice. Then if you talk about the last contact point, the seat post, as you can see, also is a very slim, very deep section. Because of this, it doesn't fit the Di2 battery anymore, like with a lot of bikes these days, like the SL8 or the Dogma F or stuff like that. So also thanks to the new UCI regulations, the battery lives on the bottom of the frame. And if you talk about the bottom of the frame, it uses a traditional BSA bottom bracket, which is also nice. Back to the seat post. On top of it, there's a Ritchie 1-bolt clamp. And I think that so far is the biggest niggle that I have with my bike. Because as you can see, it's not in a level position. And it's not done like that on purpose. Actually, just before this ride, I have corrected the position, but it just keeps slipping down. So yeah, there will have to be, I'll need to make a bit of a hack or something, some adjustment to make it stay actually in the position that I require to. I've done it up to the prescribed 12 Newton meters, didn't help unfortunately. So yeah, that's a bit of a problem that I'll need to solve still. As you can see, I've also replaced the bolt with the titanium one, but that shouldn't have any effect on the performance. So yeah, there's also a Darimo version of this seat post for this bike already, which uses a traditional 2-bolt clamp. It should work better, but it will of course not arrive in time for my key events. So maybe for next year I'll upgrade to that, but for now I have to make this one work. Big kudos also to the Wolf V8 saddle, because it's just the most comfortable and stable time trial saddle that I've ever used, and also the bottom mount is really nice, secure, and well, really practical. So I've already hinted on how the bike rides. It's not the stiffest bike in the world, I would say that. You can actually feel that when you hold the frame and you grab the rear wheel, there's a bit of flex in there, mainly because of the drop seat stays. But this is not a sprinter's bike, it doesn't need to be stiff. However, the result of that is the compliance is really rather nice. I would say this bike is quite a bit more compliant than the Hanzo, definitely, and the Shift TT as well. The servo was quite good in that regard from what I can remember, but it's just really nice to ride. I'm sure you will ask about the aero performance, obviously, because everyone wants to know that. To be honest, I haven't done testing on this bike yet, any testing, because there's no point until all the things that I want to test are ready. But from what I can see from anecdotal evidence from my training is that I tend to go really fast compared to the wattage I produce. So around zone 2, 190 to 200 watts on a flat-ish course, it's usually 40 to 41 kilometers per hour in training kits, which is pretty damn good, I have to say. So I'm a bit optimistic about that after seeing those results, because I haven't seen those kind of numbers in a while, or maybe not ever, if I'm honest. So that's good. Hopefully the legs are up to scratch as well. I would say my form is pretty good on the road bike right now, but I haven't spent much time on this, so it's not quite there yet in the TT position, but we'll see. Anyway, I really like the bike. I like how it rides. I like most of the features of it, so I'm happy with the change. Another thing that people are interested in weight. It's around 9 kilos, so what you expect really from a bike like this. Probably a bit lighter than the Factor, but not by much. I've also weighed the frame itself. It's 1300 grams for those counting. I'm not, I just thought it's I just remembered when building this up, so it's something to note. Another cool thing about this bike is actually it's a very, very low series and limited run frame, and for that reason there are some 3D printed titanium parts on it, which I do quite like. So one of those is the front derailleur hanger, really neat, although I will not be using it for much longer, but there it is. And the other thing is, which sadly you can't see, but it's the seat post wedge. And I think this little nut for the steerer is also one of them. So, and definitely one of the titanium hardware that is used is the big bolt that holds together the base bar and the fork. And unfortunately, that's quite an awkward situation, one of the few ones on this bike, because the brake hose also runs through it, so you can't really tighten it once that's in place. Yeah, that's pretty much all that comes to mind. Obviously, there's a testing phase still on, which I'll, if you're interested, of course, in the results and what we test and how do the different things perform for my setup, then subscribe to the channel, because we're posting those results soon together with the workshop crank modifications and installation. Should be ready soon, hopefully. And yeah, that's all for today. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.